huge repercussions for the world and indeed India. The Supreme Court of the United States has just a short while ago ruled against President Donald Trump's powers to impose tariffs, declaring that his use of this emergency authority was illegal and unlawful. The US Supreme Court, in a 6-3 verdict, so a fairly comprehensive verdict, has held that Trump's aggressive approach to tariffs on products entering the United States from across the world was not permitted under a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Joining me now is Rohit Sharma, joins me from Washington, D.C. Anisha Mathur joins us here. She tracks the courts here. But I want to go to you, Rohit, first. This is a major setback to Donald Trump, who over the last 9 months has weaponized tariffs, including against India. What are Trump's options now that the court has ruled against him?
Well, President Trump has two options, Rajdeep. I mean, this is definitely a major setback for the president, who actually wanted the Supreme Court to uphold his executive order, which they did not. It was kind of a given after we heard the arguments back in November. So I think President Trump was trying, and he knew that this could happen. We have Senator Lindsey Graham, who's championed a bill in the Congress, in the Senate, that has about 80 co-sponsors. So I think that would be his default option. Now Lindsey Graham in this case, could actually table that in Senate, get it passed, push it to House, and then make it legal. So that's number one. The other option that President Trump has is the Section 232 tariffs of the Trade Expansion Act. But this is limited in terms that he could only do this for 6 months. So we'll have to wait and watch what President Trump does. He was supposed to get into a meeting. He was supposed to actually do a press pool spray with governors. But as soon as the news broke out, everybody was ushered out of the room, the press, I mean. And I think the White House is currently huddling to see what would they do next. But this is definitely a major setback. And in terms of what impacts it would have on other countries, look, the countries that have already negotiated a trade agreement, including India, I don't think there would be any, repercussions or consequences of that. I think those deals will stay as it is. I don't think anybody would like to upset President Trump. The only, outlier is European Union, and they have not signed a deal with President Trump. And I think that would be another major setback if European Union wants to weaponize this and try to, do another set of negotiation based on this ruling.
But what happens to the existing tariffs? For example, with India at the moment, the tariffs do still remain as we speak at 25%. There was, of course, the additional 25% tariff that he imposed on oil purchases from Russia. Does all that go as of tonight, or is that still on paper there until such time as the Senate decides next? What happens to actually, in legal terms, to the tariffs as we speak today?
So technically, two things, Razi. First, yes, according to Supreme Court, the president did not have authority to do that. So yes, on paper, maybe they're not legal anymore, right? So there shouldn't be any. The other thing, and this gets really complicated here, is Supreme Court did not address the question that President Trump really wanted to have answered, which was, okay, you can turn it illegal if you think this is not right. But what about the money US has collected, the tariff money US has collected in the last 10 months or so? And they've left it out of the opinion. They have not ruled anything on that. And this is where I think it's going to get a little interesting. There are people who are trying to understand and decode what happens with that. But for now, in legal terms, they've vacated that, meaning essentially, there is not going to be any tariffs. They have not ruled on what happens as to with the tariffs in terms of, do they stay? Does President Trump come out and do another executive order?
No, so do we go back? I think do we go back to? No, do we go back to pre-April 1, pre the so-called Liberation Day? Are tariffs back at those rates?
According to this ruling, that is the assumption that this is where it stands. But we'll have to wait and watch. I mean, it's a 170-page long opinion, Rajdeep. It's pretty complicated in that sense also. So we'll have to understand. But now, meaning from now on forward, what we can definitely say is President Trump cannot issue another set or slap more tariffs on anybody using an executive order. That is there. Now, what happens previously? Do we go back to before April 1st? I think we'll have to wait and read and understand and break it down from the very, very interesting language that the Supreme Court has used in its 170-page opinion.
I want to go to Anisha Mathur also. Anisha, Have you looked at this tariff law and the way it operates? If this is a 6-3 verdict, the key question is whether it has any retrospective effect in terms of the tariffs that existed between April and February. Do we go back to a pre-April situation? Donald Trump could technically go to the Senate and try and push these tariffs through the Senate now.
Well, Rajdeep, to answer that question is going to take a lot more insight into the US law. But what we can tell you right now from reading this 170-page verdict is that the court of the US Supreme Court, in its majority verdict, has gone into the interpretation of IEEPA and the power of the president alone. They have not gone into the issue of refunds. They have not gone into the issue of what effect it will have with the foreign affairs and the various agreements. In fact, the dissenting opinion by Justice Kavanaugh has in fact noted this point, that the interim effects of the court's decisions could be substantial. But as far as the majority opinion is concerned, Rajdeep, all I can tell you is that they have gone on the interpretation, and only the interpretation of the IEEPA, saying that since the Congress did not specifically confer this power on the president could not have imposed unilateral tariffs, that the president does not have the power to impose such tariffs during peacetime, even if the US government had argued that the wartime emergency powers allows the president to take such unilateral action. So as our colleague was also saying, Rajdeep, we'll have to see how this pans out in the next few days, because the question of whether the tariffs already collected would have to be refunded, what impact it will have on the foreign affairs, what impact it will have on the agreements that the US government has inked with various governments, including our government. All of that we'll have to wait and see what the next step is, because this is something that the dissenting opinion has flagged, that it could have a cascading effect.
I just want to